Is it time to panic about the health of Baltimore Ravens wide receiver Rashod Bateman? We talk about that, the latest updates on Bateman, and much more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host here with you, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us on this Thursday, making us your first listen each and every day. We're free and available, all podcasting platforms, including over in video form on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe for free, both in video form and in audio form as well. And we have a lot to talk about here today on the show. Minicamp still in full swing here is the Ravens, again, as I say, taking those steps. If you're an everydayer on this show, first of all, thank you for your support, but you've heard me say it. It's steps to the regular season, OTAs, minicamp, training camp, preseason, and obviously regular season. So we'll talk a little bit about what happened at minicamp day 2. We'll talk about takeaways from that in the final part of the show. But first, I want to get into a bit of Rashod Bateman's health a little bit. It's been, I think, a cause of concern for a lot of fans over the course of the last, probably 24, 48 hours, well, more than that, because he's missed some time his rookie year, missed some time his second year. And now there was an update about Bateman, about, well, you had to have a cortisone shot, and what does that mean? So it was time to panic about Rashod Bateman after the latest update. We got a new update on Rashod Bateman, so we'll talk about that in the first segment. Then in the second segment, Marcus Peters, there's an update on him. Hasn't signed anywhere yet at the time of this recording, but a pretty significant update from Vic Tafur of The Athletic. And then we'll talk about those minicamp takeaways in the final part of the show. So let's talk about Rashod Bateman first of all here. Now, for me, Bateman is a player. People throw around the injury-prone label for players, I think, very early. Guys get injured from like Lamar Jackson, for example, is a honestly perfect example of this, where he gets injured 2 years in a row, throw in the pocket, throwing the football, running around, trying to escape pressure. And people are saying, well, he's injury prone. We can put that label on him. I say, hold on, not so fast. It's the same thing for Rashod Bateman. Bateman missed some time at the beginning of his rookie season after suffering an injury in training camp. Then he obviously had the foot injury last year. Got an update from John Harbaugh on Tuesday about how Bateman is, he has a cortisone shot in his foot now. He's going to miss some time here. And a lot of people, they were saying, well, why is this a thing? And we got another update from John Harbaugh yesterday. And, the question is it time to panic? And you might be thinking, this is war. This is terrible. Rashod Bateman, he's going to miss the whole season again. Look, my answer is no, it is not time to panic on Rashod Bateman because of the update that we did get from John Harbaugh. Essentially, John Harbaugh said that, Bateman has had the surgery to remove the hardware from his foot. The screws go in, and sometimes when they come out, there is a bit of there's healing when that happens, and there can be some discomfort in that way. So the shot is pretty much a way to ease the pain of them coming out, and can be sore when they come out. So essentially, it was just to help the pain. There wasn't anything else other than that. So I think it's a good sign that it wasn't just like unprovoked and he's having issues with the hardware still in there. So Jeff Mueller, who we referenced on yesterday's show, who does some, medical work and sports medicine type deal, said that, when the hardware is removed, bone growth occurs to fill the hole up, and the bone is temporarily in a weakened state until it fully heals. And so most likely it was irritated due to the ramp up with the load that he had and running, because the bone is in that weakened state. So cortisone injections end up managing that irritation. So you have to be able to also load manage. I think we hear that term in the NBA a lot, load manage. You have to have training frequency as well. So being able to understand how much load to put on that foot or whatever injury it is until the bone is fully healed. So, should be clear for 2023 as long as that occurs in this next phase. And Jeff saying if he pushes it too fast and the bone hasn't fully healed, he's at risk for a fracture. And so you have the injection plus multiple days off to rest. And again, this is precautionary for the Ravens, helping Bateman just ease the pain of the screws coming out in his foot. I think this was it was a needed update for a lot of people on Rashod Bateman, because look, he's a promising piece for the future here. And with the way that injuries have hit this team over the course of, you can go back however far you want to. Health is a factor for every NFL team, right? It's not just the Ravens, but for a player in Bateman who I think has so much promise and so much potential, for him to potentially have a third straight season impacted by injury, you want to do everything in your power. It's okay to have him miss some time now. Once you hit the regular season and obviously playoffs and whatnot, if you get there, that's when you don't want to have him missing time. So if you're taking precautions now, if he's missing reps in minicamp and even reps in training camp, if it has to come to that, that's what it happens. That's what the expense is in terms of, we got to miss snaps in the off-season portion of things as opposed to missing snaps in the actual season portion of things. The Ravens will take that trade-off 10 times out of 10. I'll take that trade-off 10 times out of 10. So very, very pleased to hear that, there isn't any, they don't have to go in and get the screws out if there continues to be discomfort. The screws are already out at this point, which I think is a very solid development. Now, in terms of, panicking about Bateman's health if he has another injury, I understand the concerns already where, again, he missed the time during his rookie year and he missed the time during his second season. Rashod Bateman, has only played in 18 games out of a possible 34 so far. So to me, I think that there's a lot that goes into, what if he misses more time in his third season? Can you call him injury prone then? Again, I give players a little bit more of leeway. Some people don't. Some people already say Rashod Bateman's injury prone, and I understand. But to me, if Bateman misses 3 games this year, I'm anticipating Bateman misses a couple of games this year. I just think he will. And that just comes down to, I don't think Odell and Rashod Bateman play a full 17-game season each. It'd be amazing if they did. I'd love it if they did. But for now, I'll give Rashod Bateman a couple games to say, hey, maybe there's an injury here and an injury there. But I'm not one to say, if he misses those 3 to 4 games, he's injury prone, and you count him out when you have to rely on him for a game here and a game there, because you can never rely on his health. To me, if there are 4 straight seasons of somewhat of a similar injury, like if Bateman has a setback with the foot, or if there's another lower leg or like a core injury or something like that, which is what he dealt with his rookie season, 4 straight years of something like that, then I definitely say, there's the injury prone label. 3 straight years of something like that, where it's somewhat significant missed time, and I say, we can have the conversation. Like, it's different for every player. So my conversation about Lamar Jackson in this regard is the same exact thing. I'm not going to change it for every player. It's the same thing. Lamar's had 2 straight season-ending injuries. If he has a third injury or has to miss significant time this year, that conversation can be had. I wouldn't necessarily slap the label on him right then and there, but that conversation could definitely be had. So I'm not panicking on Rashod Bateman's health right now. The Ravens aren't panicking on Rashod Bateman's health right now. It seems like everything is okay as long as they're able to load manage everything and make sure they don't rush him back. And they shouldn't rush him back. I think the Ravens have kept a very cautious approach with some of their guys, obviously working J.K. Dobbins back in, working Gus Edwards back in as well. Even with Odell, ramping up Odell Beckham Jr., John Harbaugh said, is he's coming off the ACL injury he suffered in the Super Bowl in 2021. This is the definite right approach for Baltimore. You don't want to mess around with stuff when it doesn't matter right now. I know it matters in terms of getting reps, and especially with a new offense, getting familiar in that. And the more reps you get, the better you can be familiar with the offense for week 1. But if that comes at the expense of potentially re-injuring or injuring something, that's a trade-off that I'm not taking. It's a trade-off I know the Ravens are not taking. So to me, people are panicking on Bateman's health. He's not practicing again. He's missing more time. But to me, look, we now have an explanation from John Harbaugh himself. I know that's been a little dicey over the past year with how the Lamar Jackson situation went down. But I think that was something where Harbaugh was trying to gain some competitive advantage, and it just backfired. And look, I blame Harbaugh for that. All right, I'm not letting him off the hook. But for Bateman, it feels like he actually has an understanding of what's going on there and is sharing it. So to me, I will say that it's not time to panic on Rashod Bateman's health. Don't panic yourself If there's another thing that goes on and there's another negative update, then we can revisit the conversation about Bateman's health. But for now, the cortisone shot to help relieve the pain of the screws coming out should be good to go as long as the load management is there. And that's what it is right now. So I'd say a positive update yesterday on Rashod Bateman. But coming up in the second part of the show, we have an update on Marcus Peters and what his future could be either with the Ravens or another team. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make your way to FanDuel because right now, new customers are getting no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And we're now in baseball season fully now. The NBA Finals are over. The NHL Finals. The Stanley Cup is also over now. So we got to get into full Orioles season. They've been doing well this year. And if you want to bet on Adley Rutschman, props, Gunnar Henderson, props, or Orioles wins, be sure to do it over at FanDuel. They have great promotions every day. They have a safe and secure app. You can get paid instantly. There's no better place about all of the action on America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher is still here with you on this Thursday. Thank you again for being here with us and making us your first listen each and every day. We talked about Rashod Bateman and why it is not time to panic on Rashod Bateman's health yet. Let's talk about Marcus Peters, though. We got the update on Bateman. We also got an update on Marcus Peters from Vic Taffer of The Athletic, who says that the Raiders, not the Ravens, the Raiders seem likely to sign Marcus Peters. And it says, there was an excerpt from one of his articles, and I'll read it here right now. He said, quote, talked about the corner position and said, quote, those guys may be competing for one starting job as the Raiders seem likely to sign veteran cornerback Marcus Peters before training camp. Peters came in for a visit last month, and according to league and team sources, the two sides have stayed in touch as Peters tests the market. The Raiders have other veteran cornerbacks on their list, but Peters could very likely sign with the team that he grew up rooting for as a kid in Oakland. And honestly, the way that Peters in his offseason has gone this year has been pretty weird to me. I thought he'd have much more of a market. I know he did not play well in 2022, definitely struggled coming off the ACL injury in 2021. So do not get me wrong there. But I thought there would be more of a market and more teams, I guess, being willing to bet on even just a one-year deal of Marcus Peters bouncing back. Because, look, him and Marlon Humphrey formed one of the best cornerback duos in this league for multiple seasons. And it wasn't just because Marlon Humphrey is so good, which he is very good. But Peters was, I think a lot of people had him as like a top 15, even top 10 corner for a couple years while he was in Baltimore. And so I thought either Baltimore would be interested or another team. Now, there has been some stuff coming out about how, Peters was, very fiery. We know Peters is a very fiery personality, and that's one of the things I actually like about him. Personally, it was, I think, a good fit for his personality with the Ravens, but, reports of him getting into it. And look, we saw him and John Harbaugh very publicly during a game get into it on the sideline, screaming involved there. So, that to me makes sense a little bit as to why maybe this partnership is not going to continue if Peters does sign with Las Vegas. And also the Ravens brought in Rock Ya-Sin, and I know even with Rock Ya-Sin, I was talking about how the Ravens could still afford to take a risk on bringing back Marcus Peters because they did bring in Rock Ya-Sin. But then the fit just becomes really weird because they need a slot guy really badly. To me, I think Darius Washington wins the slot job personally, if they don't bring anybody in. If they do, then it's a different conversation. But for now, Darius Washington is my favorite to win. At this point, maybe stuff changes. But to me, I don't know. It feels like a Bryce Callahan would make a lot of sense as a slot guy. It feels like Kyle Hamilton's playing more of a safety role this year, which I think he should because of the departure of Chuck Clark. But I don't know. Peters is a guy who plays outside. Rock Ya-Sin is a guy who plays outside. You don't want to move Marlon Humphrey inside. So to me, at least, it feels like Peters, there's not necessarily a pure fit. I mean, there is if you don't trust the young guys. And to me, I'm on the fence about that. Like, can Jalen Armour-Davis step up? Can Trayvon Mullen step up? Obviously, I talked about Pepe Williams and Darius Washington too. Can those players step up? Brandon Stevens is going to go back to more of a safety role, the Ravens have said. So if Armour-Davis can't do it, if Trayvon Mullen can't do it, if Kyle Kelly can't step in his rookie season on the outside, in one of Rock Ya-Sin or Marlon Humphrey. If Marlon Humphrey goes down, as I've said, if you're an everyday, you know this, the room is just kind of cooked in my opinion. I don't really see a way that it can hold up without Humphrey in there. Maybe it can, but I just don't see it. Peters is someone who I think would give that veteran stability, but it just seems like it's not in the cards right now for Baltimore. It feels like he is going to go to Las Vegas, and it makes sense. I mean, the Raiders are a team that have been looking to improve on defense for the past couple of years. They've been in a weird state where they've been trying to compete, but they just haven't been really good over the last couple of seasons. I don't know how much Peters moves the needle for them. I don't think Peters moves the needle for any team, including the Ravens at this point in his career, but he would be a quality depth piece, knows the defense, really loves Baltimore, and it feels like him potentially not coming back here. Peters hasn't officially signed at the time of this recording, but it feels like Peters not coming back would be a Ravens decision, not a Peters decision, after we saw what he posted under Lamar Jackson's post a couple weeks ago. So it does raise the question on the Ravens cornerback room. Look, we've talked about it so much. I won't go too much into detail about it right now. But with Humphrey, Ya-Sin, and then the young guys, essentially, you're putting it's to a lesser extent what happened with the wide receivers last season, because the Ravens, I think Humphrey's a proven guy. You know, he's a top 5 guy at least. With the receivers last year, they put the trust fully in the young guys, like fully, where Demarcus Robinson was the only veteran, where with the Ravens, you do have veterans like Marlon Humphrey and Rock Ya-Sin. So it's not exactly like what the Ravens did there, but it is taking a risk. Corner is a huge need for them still. I put it just below edge, literally. Edge and corner are neck and neck for me. But I am worried about the depth if the young guys cannot step up. The Ravens, they trust their guys. They like their guys. It has given them organizational success to do that over the course of their franchise history. But to me, if those guys don't pan out, if they put too much trust into those guys, and then you lose Humphrey for an extended amount of time, or you even lose Ya-Sin for an extended amount of time, and those guys still can't step up in expanded roles, this is a passing league. The Ravens have to defend against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd and Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, and in Cleveland, even Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, etc. It's a loaded AFC. It's a passing league right now. If the Ravens can't defend against that, and your slot situation is still kind of iffy, I don't know. It gives me a little worry. And again, I'm not saying Peters would have been the savior of the defense, the savior of the cornerback room. But I do think I personally would have maybe bet if everything was right off the field in terms of would he fit in the locker room still, is the fiery personality still welcome there, etc. It would have been a risk I personally would have taken, but now the Ravens have to kind of pivot. Maybe there's a trade deadline. Look, maybe they can look, and it's almost kind of like what we thought they would do at wide receiver last year, at least what I thought they would do, where if it didn't pan out, if they lost guys, they could go out there and make a trade, right? Brandon Cooks was a guy that a lot of people had linked to Baltimore. The Ravens go out there and trade for Roquan Smith, which ended up being a great deal for him. But then they lost Devin Duvernay as well, and obviously Bateman was done for the year. And that was essentially the end of the wide receiver room, where if something happens to Humphrey, if something happens to Ya-Sin, and I really hope nothing happens to either of those guys, is there a corner on the market that they could acquire that could give them more stability in that room? Again, I think it would have to be someone better than what Peters could bring them. But at this point, it feels like Peters is going to the Raiders. The Ravens are going to have to trust in their young players, something we saw them do last year at the wide receiver position. Did not work out for them. Again, a little different corner-wise because you do have a top 5 guy in Humphrey and a veteran in Ya-Sin, but they are taking a risk, and we will see what happens. Peters, if he does sign with Las Vegas, was a staple on that Ravens defense, came in and really embraced the city, embraced the team, became a fan favorite really pretty much instantly. And I know that he's not going to be forgotten in Baltimore if he does end up leaving, which seems like what it's going to be at this point. So there's a lot to remember about Marcus Peters. He hasn't signed anywhere yet, so I'm not going to get fully into that at this moment. But we'll see what happens with him, and hopefully, whatever happens, he's able to resurrect his NFL career because, again, did not play well last year, and he's a guy to root for. So I think we'll continue talking about the cornerback room as stuff develops with it, and hopefully we'll be able to have a positive outlook on it from the time the season ends in 2023. But let's get into our final part of the show now. We'll get into day 2 minicamp takeaway. So be sure to stay tuned, planning to dive into on Locked On Ravens. We're back here, our final segment, Locked On Ravens Thursday style. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you as we now dive into minicamp takeaways. I appreciate everyone for being here, whether it's audio form or video form, however you're listening, wherever you're listening. I really do appreciate it. Be sure to subscribe, audio and video form. We are free, no money involved here on Locked On Ravens. And with minicamp, it's exciting. You know, we get to see these guys on the field. There are hype videos and everything. And you get to see guys like Odell Beckham Jr. take the field in a Ravens uniform for the first time. We got to hear the coordinator speak yesterday to the media, also Lamar Jackson and also Ronnie Stanley as well. And it was really exciting to hear what Ronnie Stanley had to say, because this is the best he's felt since 2019. He said, and Stanley, I thought, played well coming off his injury last year. That's just, you know, it was a big question mark, I'd say. You know, we talked about Marcus Peters in the last segment about how these guys would come up, like with Ronnie Stanley and with Peters and with J.K. Dobbins and with Gus Edwards, how those guys would be able to come off of those injuries, how they would look, how they would feel. And it felt like Peters was the one who struggled the most, and the other 3 guys looked pretty good, all things considered. But Stanley said this is the best he has felt since 2019, which I think, for me at least, is a very encouraging sign. And he didn't expect the offense to be too different either, he said, when speaking to the media. Said that, you know, he likes what he's seeing, the concepts, the schemes, and whatnot. As he said, he's very excited to have Lamar back. And he's thankful for the opportunity to come into this season healthy. And, you know, having the offseason for him is huge. You know, we know how he didn't start the year last year. He had to ease his way in. Now it's the full offseason of focus on improving, focus on strength, which is really, really good. So to me, it's interesting to see what the approach is this offseason from guys, especially the ones who missed all of 2021 and had to use the 2022 offseason to kind of get back up to what they were. Now that is in the rearview mirror for the most part for most of the guys, and now they have the offseason to fully focus on that. Lamar Jackson also talked a little bit to the media as well and said that, you know, said Odell Beckham is him. He said he looks pretty good out there. He can catch the ball, looking pretty good, and said that looking pretty smooth and has crisp routes, great hands. And also talked about the importance of working out with Odell after minicamp, and said it's very important to keep chemistry going, keep building the chemistry. The season is right there. Said the offseason pretty much over with, which is true. It's really exciting that we're kind of getting into this football mode as we move forward here. And Lamar said he's very comfortable making adjustments at the line, and the more he's being here, it helps, helping both Lamar and Todd Monken out a lot, and saying that coach is giving him the keys of the offense, letting us do their thing, and it's helping that out a lot as well. And said that he doesn't really care about expectations with having 5 former first-round picks of wide receivers. The guys just have to get out there, do what they do, make plays, etc. And then also continued to talk a little bit about the offense. Said that, you know, with Greg Roman's offense, didn't take him too long to get into the rhythm of things, picking it up, and said that, you know, they went 14-2 the first year Greg Roman took over, and he had to kind of learn that offense. So with Todd Monken, he said the sky's the limit, and he said he's doing his job, studying, trying to learn the ins and out, pinpoint everything, and everything he pinpoints is just going to help as well. And also said that Todd Monken's attention to detail, like the being keen on small details, that's rubbed off on him, saying, you know, did a little bit yesterday with him and Nelson Aguilar. He said Nelly went out for a route, and he said he wanted him to do a certain thing within the route. And so, you know, they're kind of getting their timing right and figuring out all these little small details. A small detail can win or lose you a game, essentially. So I think it's really, really good that they're able to get that down right now in training camps, as I've talked about before. And with adjustments, you know, it's given him the keys to the offense with that whole situation. If he was eager for that in the past, and said, yeah, you know what, he was eager to kind of get that freedom. Sometimes he wants to make adjustments, but Todd Monken's given him that free will now. And again, I think, you know, it makes me a little bit upset that Lamar did not get that freedom early on in his career. I think he was more than capable of picking that up and doing things that way, but for some reason he was just not given that freedom. And part of it was, again, the Ravens were just getting to the line way too late. So I'm glad he has it now, but I just wish it came a little sooner for Lamar in that whole thing. But let's look a little bit more at takeaways from the actual day of minicamp. Just Rebeck saying, Terry Black had 2 touchdown catches. Andy Isabella made a circus catch for a touchdown as part of an extremely active day for the wide receiver. Marlon Humphrey intercepted a Lamar Jackson pass. David Ojabo continues to give the Ravens tackles issues. So those are all great updates. Spencer Schultz, friend of the show, loves Andy Isabella, so I'm sure he was very happy to hear that. But David Ojabo coming on strong is really good. Marlon Humphrey, we know Marlon Humphrey. Iron, it really is iron sharpens iron. The Ravens posted multiple videos and photos of Odell Beckham Jr. and Marlon Humphrey go. I think they actually deleted the videos and pictures of Marlon Humphrey and Odell Beckham Jr. I don't know why, but I think they did. But again, it's iron sharpens iron. These guys going up against each other in practice. Odell's going to make Marlon Humphrey better. Marlon Humphrey's going to make Odell better. That just is what it is, and I'm very excited for that overall. But then you have other updates from the offense. Jonas Schaefer of the Baltimore Banners saying, not a lot of rhythm for the offense, but a handful of big plays. Lamar Jackson threw with impressive anticipation versus pressure and finished with about 66% accuracy. Unofficially, Nelson Aguilar opened Team Joe's with a red zone touchdown catch on a simple fade, but also dropped the pass right into the hands of cornerback Marlon Humphrey on a comeback route. Nice days for Andy Isabella, Isaiah Likely, Rock Yassin, among others. Nelson Aguilar might be the Ravens wide receiver 1 by the time the offseason is over, based off just how crazy he's at his crazy start here. Is impressed almost every day, it feels like. It did have the drop there, but I think that he is exceeded expectations so far for what maybe the Ravens and Ravens fans, even what I was expecting early on from him there. The coordinators also talked. Chris Horton, the special teams coordinator, talking a little bit about roster decisions and, how the special teams aspect of things could impact roster construction. He said it's really early to discuss that, but they want to keep the plays alive there. And, talking about the return game, who is Devin Hester? Devin Hester changed the game, Cordero Patterson, etc. So is coaches, they're going to be able to, maybe with the kickoffs and everything, there are new rules that, teams were not in favor of. I don't know how it got approved, but, you have to figure out how you defend the kickoff well. And there are going to be a lot of new changes with that. So it was definitely more about the kickoff roles. And also talked about Calais Campbell and his role in special teams. And talked about how every guy comes in, every guy has a shot at making the team. So no guaranteed spots, obviously, but you come in, you got to earn your spot. That's really what Chris Horton was saying there as well. The Mike McDonald spoke to the media, said had a lot of things to say about Chuck Smith. He has a vision about how he wants to coach the pass rushers, and I think we've seen that with both Odafe Owe and David Ojabo. Talked about the improvements with Justin Madubuike. It's another year in the system for him, and taking his games to the next level with the interior pass rushing skills, and looked at the interchangeability of the secondary. We've talked about that here on the show. There are things that are up for competition. Mike McDonald said there as well, and also more Calais Campbell. Calais Campbell, someone who I do think is a big loss for them. Talked about the leadership void that, guys are stepping up with that. Broderick Washington, Justin Madubuike, Michael Pierce, and he's encouraging guys to be themselves, lead in their own way. Says the team loves Calais Campbell, but he's not on the team anymore, so there's now more opportunities for other guys to step up. And also said that Roquan Smith will have the green dot after Chuck Clark, obviously now in New York with the Jets. And then Todd Monken talked a little bit to the media and talked a little bit about Lamar Jackson's and what he said, that, the outspokenness of him is starting to rub off on Lamar, and said that it has a lot to do with Lamar and the communication, and everything starts with the center, the quarterback, and, he has to keep doing it if it means that it's helping out. Also talked about the tight end room a little bit, says there's nothing like having talent. There's only one football, but kind of utilizing those skill sets, the personnel groupings, etc. They haven't put on pads yet, but he's excited with that and the wide receiver room as well. Talked about Patrick Ricard a little bit, someone who says he adds a different dynamic skill set than the other guys. And with one thing, Pat hasn't been out there right now, he said, but from what he's seen in the past, there's a certain element of toughness. So I personally, I don't know what his role is going to be, but he's embraced the role that he's had, and we'll kind of see what's happened from there. Said Lamar Jackson's execution has been good, And there's not a lot of time comparing it to last year for him. It's about of what the team is this year. Said the job is to score points, and the defensive coordinator's job is to stop them. So he said he's paid to score points, and it's a lot simpler than that, just trying to fit pieces in the right spot there. So plenty of conversation from the coordinators here. We'll continue to dive into the minicamp aspect of things for Baltimore as that continues over the course of the next couple of days here. And again, stepping stones to the regular season as we're getting closer and closer to that. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We'll get back here tomorrow, rounding out the week with more Ravens content. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.